Violence? No. Rape, arson, war, muggings, right? And those are reactive, accurate images. But look at the images that don't occur to us, that quantitatively are far more prevalent. Start with crime. 16,000 Americans subjected to homicides last year, street and in the homes. Okay, according to OSHA, 58,000 Americans died last year from workplace-related diseases and traumas. Coal disaster the other day. 58,000. See the comparison? We would like to believe that all these forms of violence are preventable. Homicides and job-based deaths and so on. 65,000 people die, according to EPA, because of air pollution. Horrible deaths, asphyxiation, cancer. 65,000 compared to 16. Preventable. Over 100,000 die from negligence in hospitals. That doesn't even count hospital-induced infections, which are killing 90,000 people a year, according to the Centers for Disease Control. Over 100,000 from malpractice in hospitals. Preventable. 90,000 infections. Preventable. Johns Hopkins has led the way. And they're making their doctors wash their hands, along with their nurses. Great discovery. It's up for the Nobel Prize. 45,000 people die in this country every year because they can't afford health insurance to get treated or diagnosed. Journal of Public Health, American Journal of Public Health, December 2009, peer-reviewed study by Harvard Medical School researchers. Now, isn't it interesting that we hear about terrorism in 9/11, and we hear about street crime, but have you seen a campaign for senator or president with the two parties mention all these other kinds of violence? Now, why do they ignore them? Is it because they don't occur? No, they do occur. Is it because they're not huge enough? Yes, they're huge enough. Is it because they come from corporate misbehavior and negligence and crime? You got it. So the very styles of violence that we designate for high priority publicity and reaction or low priority depend on who perpetrates the violence. So that's the difference between street crime and corporate negligence and crime. Let's take corporate crime that isn't violent. How about Wall Street looting and draining? Trillions of dollars of worker pension funds with wild conflict of interest ridden speculation with other people's money while these Wall Streeters feather their own nest to unheard of compensations. Okay? So we're talking trillions of dollars here following the collapse of Wall Street alone. But you can run through every category. When we don't have the power to fight back, to prevent or to punish, auto dealers and repair shops rip us off. The figure 20 years ago was 30 billion a year. That was 20 years ago. How about the rackets in the insurance industry? That's at least 60 to 80 billion dollars just by not obeying the modest state insurance laws right there. Well, how about billing fraud and abuse in the healthcare industry? Would you care to guess how much that is? It ranges, this year, it'll range between $250 and $400 billion. Billion dollars. You know, pretty soon it adds up to real money, right? Huh? So these are crimes. But they are very, very rarely prosecuted. When they are, they're pretty sensational in terms of every dollar that a federal prosecutor is spent on a federal prosecutor brings in $17 in payback for uncovered and punished frauds, corporate frauds. For example, Pfizer last year was fined $2.3 billion for pushing unapproved uses of its drugs. half of it was a criminal fine. Well, you can see it took just probably a fraction of $1 million to catch Pfizer by the federal government. So it's a big payback. So, how many dollars do you think bank robbers took from banks? Well, latest figure is about 50 million. It's nothing compared to the corporate thefts. Nothing. And yet, look at the attention. The city goes berserk over bank robberies. Very few of them end up in any violence, by the way. The bank robber wants to get the heck out of there. You know. So, let's take regulation. Who regulates more? Government regulates more or business? Well, first of all, business regulates us through government because they can persuade government to issue different kinds of rules and double standards. And, for example, the IRS has experienced a 1/3 decline in its audits of giant corporations in the last few years. It's spending a lot of time on catching earned income fraud by poor people. Now, if you want to have an Internal Revenue Service investigator get a return to the U.S. Treasury, you would put that person on a multinational corporation's books, not on trying to squeeze out $180 from some poor person. So you see how it's skewed? And so the other way they regulate us is, well, first of all, the contracts I just mentioned. That fine print is basically their private legislature, and the judges hold it up. And there's no competition. If you don't like the insurance policy fine print of State Farm, and you want to go to Allstate across the street, because you think you can get a better deal, it's the same fine print. The same with Ford Motor Company dealer or VW company dealer. They don't compete over the fine print. So you really don't have a choice, unless you don't want to buy anything. Well, let's see. Corporations don't like government planning. You know, that's supposed to be socialism. Okay? Well, who do you think plans our life more? And you can't diselect these CEOs. I mean, at least you could, if you mobilize, make sure your representative's defeated. There's an opening there. But try to can the head of Citigroup. Try to can the head of ExxonMobil. Even if you were a major shareholder. It's rigged against its own owners, the shareholders, controlled at the top. So, here's a way to look at it. When corporations engage in strategic planning, they're planning our lives. When they decide they're going to push junk food onto youngsters and junk drink, and they know very well that it's going to lead to record levels of child obesity, child diabetes, predisposition to high blood pressure, and they keep pushing these ads on TV to 6 and 8 and 9-year-olds, bypassing their parents, undermining parental authority, with all these clever little ads and mascots and cartoon figures. They are basically condemning to death and sickness prematurely these children. They are planning the health of those children. And you might say, well, you know, they don't have to eat this stuff. Well, if there were peeping Toms all over in your neighborhood, and you called the police, what would you think of the police if the police said, you don't like the peeping Toms? Pull down your shade. What would you think of that? You would say, hey, I don't want to pull down my shade. I want you to get in your car and catch those peeping Toms. Well, these are electronic child molesters. They are using our property, the public airwaves, these marketeers, the food companies, the drink companies. They're using our property, free, the public airwaves, just like Rush Limbaugh does. He's lunching off our property. He's a freeloader. I wrote him a letter saying, stop taking our property without paying for it. He didn't even know what I was saying. He was so out of it.